Learn English through story. The weight of silence. In a small town nestled between mountains, there lived an old man named Victor. Victor had spent his entire life as a carpenter, building homes, furniture, and even coffins for the people in his village. He was known for his skillful hands and the quiet, stoic manner in which he carried himself. Though he was a master of his craft, Victor was also a man of few words, choosing silence over conversation, and solitude over companionship. Victor's silence was not born of arrogance or disdain for others. It was a habit formed from years of pain and regret. Many years ago, Victor had a younger brother, David. David was lively, outgoing, and had a heart full of dreams. The two brothers had been inseparable as children, but as they grew older, differences in their personalities began to drive a wedge between them. Victor was practical, grounded in reality, while David was idealistic and always chasing after new ventures. One summer, David decided to invest all his savings into a new business venture, a mill by the river. He was confident that it would bring prosperity to the village and secure his future. Victor, ever the pragmatist, advised against it. He warned David of the risks, of the potential for failure, and how one mistake could ruin him. But David, with his boundless optimism, brushed off Victor's concerns and went ahead with his plans. The mill was built quickly, and for a time, it flourished. The village buzzed with activity, and David was at the center of it all, smiling and brimming with pride. But soon, trouble struck. A severe drought gripped the region, and the river that powered the mill began to dry up. Without water, the mill's operations ground to a halt. David's debts mounted, and his dreams began to crumble. One evening, after a particularly harsh day, David came to Victor's workshop. His eyes were hollow, his face etched with worry. He confessed to Victor that he was on the brink of losing everything and asked for his brother's help. Victor, still hurt by David's dismissal of his earlier warnings, refused. He told David that he had made his choice and now had to live with the consequences. Life is about learning from your mistakes, Victor said coldly. This is your lesson. David left without another word. He returned to his empty mill, and that night, as the moon cast a pale glow over the village, David took his own life. The next morning, when Victor heard the news, his heart shattered. The silence that had once been a source of peace for him became a heavy burden. He was consumed by guilt, knowing that his refusal to help his brother had driven David to despair. Years passed, but the weight of that night never left Victor. He continued to work as a carpenter, crafting pieces of wood into works of art, but his soul remained scarred. He withdrew further into his silence, speaking only when absolutely necessary. The village noticed, but no one dared to pry into the old man's sorrow. One day, a young woman named Anna arrived in the village. She was new to the area, having moved from the city to escape the chaos of urban life. Anna was curious and compassionate, with a knack for bringing people together. She quickly became a beloved member of the community, her warmth and kindness touching everyone she met. Anna had heard of Victor, the reclusive carpenter, and felt drawn to him. She noticed how he always worked alone, never joining in the village's festivities, never smiling. One evening, she decided to visit him at his workshop. As she entered, she saw Victor hunched over his workbench, meticulously carving a piece of wood. The workshop was filled with the smell of sawdust and the sound of his chisel against the wood. "Good evening, Mr. Victor," Anna said softly. Victor looked up, surprised by the intrusion, but said nothing. He simply nodded and returned to his work. Anna didn't leave. Instead, she began to talk, telling Victor about her life, her reasons for moving to the village, and her hopes for the future. She spoke of her love for the simple things in life and how she had come to appreciate the beauty of silence, but only when it was shared with others. Victor listened in silence, his hands still working, but his mind gradually becoming absorbed in her words. Days passed, and Anna continued to visit. Each time, she spoke a little more, and Victor found himself responding, at first with nods, then with words, and finally, with stories of his own. He told Anna about his brother, about the mill, and about the silence that had enveloped his life since David's death. He confessed the guilt that had gnawed at him for years, how he had refused to help his brother in his time of need, and how that decision had led to David's tragic end. Anna listened patiently, her eyes filled with empathy. When Victor finished, there was a long silence between them. Finally, Anna spoke. "Mr. Victor, silence can be a sanctuary, but it can also be a prison. You've been punishing yourself for something that was beyond your control. Your brother made his choices, just as you made yours. But you've lived in this silence for too long. It's time to forgive yourself." Victor's eyes welled up with tears. No one had ever told him that before. For the first time in years, he felt a glimmer of hope, a sense that perhaps he could find peace. Over the following months, Victor began to open up more. He joined the village gatherings, shared meals with his neighbors, and even began teaching the younger generation the art of woodworking. The burden of his silence slowly lifted, replaced by the warmth of connection and the healing power of forgiveness. The villagers noticed the change in Victor, how the once silent carpenter had found his voice again, and as he spoke, they listened, not just to his words, but to the wisdom and compassion that had been buried beneath years of guilt and regret. Victor realized that while silence had once been his refuge, it was in breaking that silence, in sharing his pain and his story, that he had finally found redemption. And with that, the weight of his past began to fade, leaving him with the peace he had sought for so long. I hope you enjoyed the story. If you enjoyed, then please like and share this video, and don't forget to subscribe our YouTube channel. Thank you for watching.